Oh, hello there, and welcome back to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccoladini. This week on the show, our topic is that of food and beverage in ancient Rome. Yes, like many others, the ancient Romans have been found to have been very fond of food, and perhaps even more fond of beverage. Like most of us, they ate 3 meals a day. The first meal of the day was called ientaculum, the second, prandium, and the third, cena. At cena, it was common to eat one of the earliest and most common simplistic of Roman meals. It was, to say, their bread and butter. And that was pulse, which was a oatmeal-like grain porridge, often made of barley and later, in the imperial times, of wheat. This would have many different things mixed into it depending on what the individual making it happened to have on hand. Meats, herbs, cheeses, and the ever-popular dates were often included. And the end product is said to be similar to modern risotto. And pulse was eaten for supper by all classes of the Roman people, from the richest to the poorest. It was, indeed, the Roman staple. Everywhere the Roman military went, it planted 2 things, those being the grape and the olive. And olives came into Roman cuisine in a wide variety of dishes, often included in pulse, and as a garnish alongside many dishes. Romans were fond of pork belly and fish, amongst a variety of available meats that became larger and larger as the empire grew. And as the Republic turned into the empire, and surged to all corners of the Mediterranean and into the world beyond, the taste of the Roman aristocracy began to involve a wider and wider array of exotic dishes. These included flamingo's tongues, which were extraordinarily popular amongst the Roman aristocracy in the imperial age, along with sea urchin, and parrot, and red mullet, which in Roman imperial times was worth its own weight in silver and is said to have bankrupted a fair degree of the Roman aristocracy, who spent their outrageous fortunes on the red mullet-fueled symposia that must have been extraordinarily popular amongst the wealthy of the day. A symposium was something like a Roman dinner party, in which multiple courses and many different wines would be served alongside entertainment and diversions and conversation, often of an intellectual nature, which was a big part of the trend for them, as the word symposium was derived from Plato's well-known book, The Symposium. A book about a banquet wherein a philosophical dialogue is had by the characters who discuss love and sexuality from a mystical sort of standpoint. Romans at symposia, and Romans in general, enjoyed eating laying down, often on what resembles a chaise lounge, but is a sort of couch or couch lounge chair-like apparatus, and the Romans believed that this in fact favored digestion. If you were an ancient Roman at a symposium, you might expect to be served appetizers such as dates stuffed with nuts and coated in honey, Foods like pork belly slathered in honey and then fried or roasted, and wine mixed with honey and water. They really didn't go light on the honey. Fish, squid, and other sea creatures were also very common. Pizzas, or pizza-like meals with flat dough pounded out, flatbread with sort of a soft cheese layer spread on top of that, and then all kinds of various little things, dates, pomegranate seeds, olives, got placed on top as toppings, were actually pretty common, along with cheesecake-like cakes often made with ricotta and honey. The Romans loved to use black pepper, and the black pepper they used was a unique sort of black pepper called long pepper, which you can still find today. And everything was cooked in, drizzled, or draped in olive oil for the most part. At one point, olive oil and wine accounted for 70% of the Roman Empire's income. And olive oil production and trade employed a large amount of people, sometimes up to 80% of the Roman Empire's workforce. And olive oil wasn't used just for food, but for just about everything. It was used to power lamps. It was used to make medicines, and it was used to make soap, and olive mills were central to the ancient Roman world. But there was a liquid that was more important to the Romans than olive oil, and it was something you'd be certain to have as a condiment if you were an ancient Roman eating at a symposium. And this condiment was called garum, and it was a fish sauce. This fish sauce was a huge hit throughout the entirety of the Roman Empire and was absolutely ubiquitous to Roman life. And some have called it the ancient Roman ketchup. Garum was made using tuna, sardines, anchovies, oysters, prawn, squid, eel, and mackerel, along with other sea creatures. There were a wide variety of brands and presentations, and the most popular for the ancient Romans were those made with mackerel. The process of making garum included a month-long fermentation. The fermentation of a stack of ordered salt, herbs, and fish. Into a small barrel, a layer of fish or sea critters would be laid down on the bottom. On top of this, a layer of herbs, and on top of that, a thick layer of salt. Then this would be repeated again. Another layer of fish, another layer of herbs, another layer of salt, until, with the final layer of salt, the top had been reached. This barrel would then be sealed and left in the hot sun for a week. Then it would be turned over and left out in the hot sun for another week. After a month, the barrel would be opened and the liquid would be strained from the goop. This liquid was pure garum, and as far as the ancient Romans were concerned, it was about the closest thing to heaven. The solid leftovers would often be used to make more lesser brands of or types of garum, or to make fish paste, which was also a very common and popular condiment for the ancient Romans. We are fortunate enough these days to know many of the different types of garum that the Romans produced. One very popular and extremely expensive kind was Garum sociarum, said to be the most expensive of the garums. Another type was Garum scombri. This was made in Spain and was made from mackerel, mackerel roe, and mackerel blood. Another sort that we know of today was Garum castaminarium, which was certified kosher. That is not made with eels or squids and non-kosher sea creatures, and was popular with the Jewish communities in those ancient Roman times. Garum would be applied liberally to just about everything for a savory umami kick. Imagine a nice garum-soaked flamingo tongue. But what the ancient Romans drank was even more important to them than what they ate at these symposiums, often enough. And what the ancient Romans really liked to drink was wine. Ancient Romans had inherited the tradition of wine making and wine drinking from the Etruscans, who had gotten their ideas from the Greeks, and the Greek traditions of wine making and wine drinking were evident in Roman society from early on. This included the mixing of wine with water, which was done by everyone throughout Roman society, and the act of drinking wine undiluted with water was seen as a barbarian quality. Perhaps because the Germanic people were very fond of drinking their wine undiluted with water and getting really drunk. However, those same Germanic people would go on to make a contribution to the ancient Roman wine world that would really shake the boat, and that being the wine barrel, which was introduced to the ancient Romans by the ancient Germanic people, and which became as ubiquitous as garum in the end amongst the ancient Roman society. Up until the introduction of the wooden barrel for the fermentation of wine by the Germanic people, the Romans used the amphora, so popular to the Greeks and Phoenicians before them, which were tall, thin clay jars with little handles up at the top by the neck. Beer, though it had long been drank in the ancient world, was less favored by the Romans, except for those Romans in Egypt and other places where beer had been drank for thousands of years already, and that cultural impulse never changed. Still, one Roman emperor said that while wine tastes sweet, beer has the flavor and aroma of a wet goat. Beer drinking had been popular for the Gauls in France until Roman society invaded and introduced the wine culture that has remained so popular amongst the French people until this day. Drinking wine mixed with water was believed to disinfect the water, which was a actual problem in the ancient Roman times, when sanitization was not a simple matter and when most water was contaminated. Unfortunately for ancient Roman wine, it sometimes had the addition of marble or chalk powder, seawater, and even pitch or tar, which Romans honestly believed made the wine better. The marble powder, or chalk powder, or limestone powder was meant to get rid of excess acidity. The seawater, Romans for some reason believed was healthy when mixed with wine. Not just potable, but healthy. However, on the more positive side, honey and herbs were often added in as well, and the finished wine would frequently be mixed with even more honey, creating a concoction that the Romans called mulsum. And mulsum had many varieties and was very popular. One especially popular variety of mulsum was conditora. In the early days, of the Roman Republic, one of the most popular wines was called Cacubu. In the Augustinian days of the early Roman Empire, one of the most popular was called Cetinum. And these were Italic wines from in or around Latium. But the most popular Latin wine was the falernum, a white wine 10 to 20 years aged with an amber color. Its lowest grade was Caucinian, and the regular grade was Falernian, which was said to ignite if a candle was held to it. So high was its alcohol content. The highest grade of falernum was called Faustian and was said to cost an enormous amount. But for a much cheaper drink, Romans liked to drink water mixed with vinegar, which they believed had the same sort of disinfectant effect as wine, and which was given out as a frequent beverage to the Roman army on the march. At this time in history, fruit juices and animal milks were obtainable, but often could not be stored long and could not be shipped. Wine, vinegar, and beer could all be stored and shipped. Wine could be stored and shipped for the longest compared to beer, and was a beverage that throughout the ancient world people believed was healthy. And our modern science confirms that wine would disinfect water to a different degree, to a certain degree, and that wine, having many antioxidants and other beneficial qualities, is a healthy beverage indeed, so long as you don't have all too much of it. Another thing that the ancient Romans believed was very healthy was the spice Siphium, a mystery in the ancient world that has been solved, perhaps, only in the last 5 years. Siphium, an extraordinarily popular spice amongst the ancient Greeks and Romans, was said to be driven to extinction and disappeared entirely. It is even said that the Emperor Nero had the last branch of Siphium to ever exist. However, just in the past 5 years, a Turkish scientist named Mahmut Muski published findings that stated that the native Turkish laserwort is the very same Siphium that was lost once long ago, but has somehow survived in the Anatolian hinterlands. The report on this finding by the Greek media seemed to confirm that the researcher is correct. And whether this is bias or truth, one must admit, it would be interesting to get a taste of that shit. Oh, hello there. Thank you for listening to the Eternal Podcast of the Broccoladini. The Eternal Podcast of the Broccoladini is brought to you by Caligula's Lake Nemi Party Boat Barbecue. Caligula's Lake Nemi Party Boat Barbecue. Come drunk, leave weird. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. At least almost as much as I enjoyed making it. Shabbat shalomini to the broccolodini. Until next time, my friends.